Here we are, chapter 13. We're going to be talking about mortgages. I really don't think that it's super important in the Dearborn book to really dive super into the chapters 13, 14, 15. I usually say that at the beginning of 13. I don't think that these are chapters that they're long. There's a lot of material in them as far as the scope of the material and what you're going to actually see on the test. I just don't think that they correlate to the two. So again, my thoughts in 2018 in regards to mortgages and what I've seen on the exam and what I've seen as far as, just again, the general amount of questions that you'll see on this. I really don't think that this should be a main focus. So 13, 14, 15, of course, complete them. Work on them, but do not put a lot of emphasis on them. So let's talk about a note and a mortgage, okay? Let's talk about what a mortgage is, because, I always say this at the beginning of 13. People always say, I am going mortgage, okay? So they have a misconception that the money is the mortgage, okay? The money is a loan, okay? The money is a loan, okay? The mortgage is a pledge of real property given by a borrower as security for a loan, okay? So these two things are totally different. And I think that if you've listened to some of my other chapters, you'll hear me say, and you've been in my classes, you'll hear me say, OR gives, EE receives. So when we see mortgage or, okay, grant or, okay, when we're talking about deeds, mortgage or is giving the mortgage. Who's giving the mortgage? The borrower is actually giving the mortgage, because the money is not the mortgage. The mortgage is a pledge of real property given by a borrower. It is given by a borrower as security for the loan. So what happens is the property actually becomes an asset of bank, okay? Another important part of the mortgage, okay, is a note or a bond, which is a personal promise to repay the loan, okay? So what happens is the note is actually saying, hey, I am going to repay that loan, okay? And, and here's the mortgage, which is a pledge of real property. You now have this bank, you now have this as an asset to you. This is now the bank's asset, the property, okay? So now we're going to talk a little bit more about the note. So the note is a financing instrument that is signed by the borrower. Notice how they say the mortgagor, the one who is giving the mortgage, and it is a personal obligation to repay the loan. Now, the mortgage is security instrument, which is a pledge of real property signed by the borrower. So the mortgagor, which I have said this again, okay, is the owner of the property. The mortgagor, the one who is giving the mortgage, okay, to the lender, okay, is the owner of the property, or the borrower, okay? The mortgagee is the lender. Something else that you might hear of is to mortgage a property, okay, is to hypothecate it. That is the process of pledging real property as security of a payment for a loan without surrendering possession. So you actually aren't surrendering possession. You're basically allowing them to encumber the property, take a lien out. We've spoken about that, okay, on the property. It is now an asset of the banks, okay, because if you default, there are things that we'll talk about in regards to that, how the lender could look to get restitution and repayment on the loan, okay? So now, provisions of the note. This is something that is executed by the borrower. It states the amount of the debt, the time and method of the repayment, and also the rate of the interest, okay? It's signed by all parties who have interest in the property. So it is signed. The note is signed by everyone who has interest in the property, regardless if they are involved in the loan process or not, okay? So signed by all parties who have interest in the property. Now, provisions of the mortgage document. And again, this is a little different from some of my other chapters, because again, I do not want you to focus so much on 13, 14, 15. I even have shrunk down some of this material. So the provisions of the mortgage document, it is executed by the owner of the property, because again, we're going to say this probably 1,000 times. If there is anything that you should write down on your book, is that the money is not the mortgage. If you know that the money is not the mortgage, you will understand mortgagor, one giving the mortgage, is the borrower, okay, not the lender, okay. Also, mortgage has to have a legal description which identifies pledged security for debt. It will also identify the lender and the borrower, and again, should be signed by all parties, and so on and so forth. So this, again, I'm really breezing through this because I don't think that you should spend too much time on this. Duties of the mortgagor, okay? The borrower, repay debt, pay all real estate taxes. They want to make sure that you're paying all those taxes. So taxes are usually paid by the lender, because as part of the repayment for the loan, okay, they'll roll that right into it because they want to make sure that that no one else could have a claim to the property because of unpaid real estate taxes, okay? Also, as a borrower, you have to obtain permission before major repairs are done or renovations to the property. Because again, this is an asset of the banks, okay? So there is also an assumption that you will maintain the property and secure permission before adding any second mortgage within 30 days. So if you have to go outside, get another mortgage, get something else on the property, they will ask you to obtain permission from them before getting a second mortgage, because again, the property is an asset of the banks, right? So there's some other clauses that you'll actually see in the mortgage, okay? And again, the mortgage is what is given to the lender, okay, from the borrower. If you get nothing else out of Chapter 13, walk away with that. So an acceleration clause. So what is an acceleration clause? This actually says that the entire debt can be due immediately if you actually default on the property. So if you default on your payments, okay, the lender may accelerate the debt. Okay, this helps in foreclosure process. So this is really what they would be calling upon if they were to look to start a foreclosure process. So if you are behind payments or are in default in regards to your payments, then what will happen is they'll allow the acceleration clause to kick in, which will say that the full debt is due and owe immediately. Okay. The next thing is a defeasance clause. This says that when the debt is repaid, there is no further claim that the lender has to the property. So that is an important thing too, because if the debt is fully repaid, there is no further claim on the property. Now, there also might be other things that you could do. So we've spoken about assignments, assigning contracts, assigning things of that nature. You can assign a mortgage to to someone else potentially. But again, it's something that would be a rare occasion, but you could assign it if it is an assignable mortgage. Okay. Recording of mortgages. Those are always recorded because when we're talking about recording different, when we're talking about the order in which liens take priority in the order in which they are recorded in public records. So what'll happen is if they need to go before public records to record this, acknowledge this, okay, signature must be acknowledged on the mortgage, okay? Signature must be acknowledged, which means, and we're saying, when we say signature must be acknowledged, we're saying notarized. Notarized is what is the acceptable nomenclature for that. So acknowledged signature is a notarized signature, okay? Now, foreclosure, we'll talk about this for a little bit. Foreclosure is a process by which the borrower, okay, mortgagor, the one giving the mortgage, defaults on the payment and obligations in the mortgage. Lender may ask the court to order a foreclosure sale. Goes in this order. There is a lis pendens put on the property. Lis pendens means legal action is pending, okay? Lis pendens is issued on the property. There's then a sheriff's sale. Again, I am not going to get into the nitty-gritty, down to the wire information about the sheriff's sale. That's something that you could really read in the book. It goes into a little more detail. It's good to read through it once, understand it a little bit, have a more in-depth view of it. Like I said, if I'm giving you the 10,000-foot view, it'll dial it down to the 500-foot view. Is that the most important thing for the test? I don't believe so. However, it is something that is good to at least have your eyes glance on that once. And then a sheriff's deed is issued, okay? Now, there's also other means of repayment, okay, which I do want to talk about. Foreclosure is not the only option. One of them, which is super popular, is deed in lieu of foreclosure. So deed in lieu of foreclosure. Why do people do deed in lieu of foreclosure, and what is it? Okay, the deed in lieu of foreclosure is also referred to as cash for keys. So if a borrower or mortgagor, the one giving the mortgage, is actually in default, okay, so they have not been paying their mortgage. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. They have not been, because I want to make sure that you're getting the whole thing here. They have not been repaying their loan, okay? They have not been repaying their loan. They're in default on the loan, okay? The bank's probably going to say to them, hey, you've been on default on the loan. We're going to potentially foreclose on you. Now, the foreclosure process is not a cheap one for the bank to undertake, okay? It is not it is not a quick process, okay? It is something that takes some time and could cost a lot of money. So what happens is banks usually say, hey, if you're willing to leave the property now, give us the deed in lieu of foreclosure, okay? We'll give you X amount of dollars. Sometimes 5,000, sometimes 50,000, sometimes a lot of money, sometimes a little bit. Sometimes it's just enough to get you back into a situation where you can get you on your feet, things like that. That's an option, a very popular option for people who are facing that as a concern to them. Okay, if someone's facing foreclosure, deed in lieu of foreclosure, it is definitely something that is a preferred option. Second thing is a short sale. What is a short sale? Okay, short sale is if a bank, okay, is owed more money than the home is worth. If the bank is owed more money than the home is worth, home was purchased for $200,000. There is a loan on it of $150,000 because they put $50,000 down. Let's just throw that out there. The home is only worth now, 10 years later, let's say $100,000. Okay, so $50,000, that is still owed. Let's just throw that out there. Some rough numbers. If the borrower could prove that there is a hardship and get it approved, because short sales have to be approved by the bank, they could sell it short. Now, they would walk away with nothing in this situation, okay? They would walk away with $0, but their debt would be forgiven with the proceeds of the sale of the home, even though they are short of what is owed on the home. Next to deficiency judgment, I'm not going to really go into that because, again, that's something that your book really touches on in more eloquent details. REO, basically, that's real estate owned by banks, okay, that has completed the foreclosure process. So it's basically completed the foreclosure process, and the real estate is owned by the banks. So you might see people looking for REO properties. And basically what they're looking for is when they say REO, they're looking for bank-owned properties. They're looking for properties that might have been in a foreclosure process. Now, here's the thing. Just because it is an REO property doesn't mean that it is a good value. Some people think that it is. There are some good values to be had out there, but you're not necessarily getting it at under market value because the bank might have the debt that might have to be repaid on it might be more than what is owed, so than what the fair market would bring, excuse me. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And with that, that's chapter 13. Not much to really kind of go over here, but we'll go over some other things in the next couple chapters. All right. That's it. You'll stop the recording.